Hi, alternates. It's day 7 of Georgia versus Nicholas Kassotis, and we might have a verdict as soon as day 8, which is the day that you will be listening to this. That's right. The state wrapped up their case yesterday on day 6, and today, day 7, after a few things outside of the courtroom, the jury walked in, and there he was, Nicholas Kassotis, actually, Nicholas Stark, and he was ready to take the stand. So remember on day 3 when I told you if I was a betting woman? Here we go. I should have bet on this. By the way, yesterday I went live, or today, day 7, I went live on my Military Murder Instagram channel, and I watched his testimony live with listeners, and it was so exciting to watch and just kind of react at the same time. Together with our listeners, we were equally shocked by some of the testimony, which I will get into today. So let's get into it. And just FYI, I will be referring to the defendant as Nick just to make things easier. Nicholas Killian James Stark was born in New Hampshire. Now, this is his testimony, right? He was raised in a one-stoplight town, and after graduating from high school, he went to college in Boston and also obtained a JD degree, a law degree. He obtained his license to practice law in the state of Massachusetts. By 2008, he joined the Navy Judge Advocate General Corps, aka the JAG, and his military career included various positions, including defense attorney, legal assistance attorney, prosecutor, and even legal advisor to the Secretary of the Navy. He was stationed both stateside as well as overseas in Italy, and he deployed twice, once for a humanitarian mission and once to Iraq, where he served by advising on detainee issues. When he returned stateside, he was stationed at the Pentagon, where he advised the Secretary of the Navy on high-level discharges and other administrative-type actions. At night, while he was at the Pentagon, he worked on obtaining his LLM, which is a master's in law. In that degree, he focused his advanced studies on national security and cyber investigations. He left active duty in 2017, but became a civilian employee of the DoD, working for the Naval Board of Corrections of Military Records. By the way, he was still in the Navy Reserve at this point. He testified that he left active duty for geographical stability, and he left the reserve at some point because Mindy, his second wife, had health issues. With regards to relationships, while stationed at his first duty assignment in Norfolk, Virginia, that's where Nick met Heather B., his first wife. They were married in 2009, and while it was not explicitly stated, it appears that Heather is also a veteran. Nick explained that his marriage with Heather wasn't great, specifically because he was not around a lot because of training and deployments and all that jazz. She initially said that she wanted kids, but then she couldn't get pregnant. The arguments were constant, and then Nick discovered that Heather was having an affair. When he confronted her, she didn't deny it, and she simply just moved out. Nick filed for divorce, and it was granted within a month. And the next day, Heather apparently married the man that she had an affair with. In September of 2015, Nick met Mindy on a dating app called OkCupid. Within a month of dating, they were already talking about marriage, and they were in fact married a year later in October of 2016. Nick was still active duty at the time when he married Mindy. He said that because he was so busy with work and obtaining his LLM, Mindy was basically in charge of the finances of the family, him and his wife. And in late 2017, she began noticing that money was going missing from their bank accounts. And the suspicious charges were not only odd because, neither of them had, made those charges, but they were odd because the statements were non-descriptive. Like it would literally just say payment and then an amount. But when you clicked into it, it wouldn't give a location, a state, a website, or anything like that. In addition to these financial issues, they experienced vandalism at their home, which, remember, Mindy moved in with Nick into the house that Nick had previously lived in with his ex-wife, Heather, and they owned together. So Nick and Heather still own this home, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So that house was being vandalized. Nick also received threatening emails, and their physical mail, the one that you get at your house, would mysteriously disappear. Now, Nick didn't report any of this to the local authorities because the crimes, remember, he's an attorney, so he knows that the crime of mail fraud and financial fraud, or wire fraud, were federal charges. Instead, Nick went to the FBI website, and on the website, apparently, you can file a complaint, and that's what he did. Mindy also went on the FBI website and she filed a complaint as well. Nick acknowledged that the fraud they were experiencing was low level, or that they were low on the totem pole, right? Their mail was getting stolen. It was some money being missing. He didn't feel like it was a big deal. Or he thought that the FBI was going to feel like, hey, this is not really that important. But one day, to his surprise, while he was at work, Mindy called him and was like, hey, the FBI showed up and they want to talk to us about our filing. And specifically, the agent who showed up, the FBI agent who showed up, his name was Jim McIntyre. Now, Nick felt like he hit the lottery. Like he was like, oh, good, they're actually going to take me seriously. Nick eventually met with Jim back at the house, and this was a big issue when he was testifying, but Nick never asked Jim for his credentials. He never was like, show me your ID or anything like that. He just basically was like, hey, Mindy, I think, had seen the identification card or whatever, so I really didn't think anything of it. Why would some guy show up at my doorstep saying he's FBI if he wasn't really in the FBI? In any event, Jim obtained all of Nick's information, including his bank details. At some point, I don't think it was the first day, but he got a spare key to his house and he got access to all of Nick's social media information. And Jim was like, okay, I'll get back with you. Now, Nick says he gave all this information because he was like, hey, I contacted the FBI. The FBI shows up, so I'm going to give them as much as possible so that they could put a stop to this or figure out who the heck is stalking me. Eventually, Jim informed Nick that he was the victim of an overseas hacking crew and that this was common among the veteran community. Eventually, Nick left his job working for the DoD, including the reserves, and Jim got Nick a remote job working for a company called Apis Limited. When asked what his role was at Apis Limited, he said he was general counsel of AI software development. And he also dabbled in coding, although he says that he wasn't very good at it. With regards to pay and how he was paid, Nick testified that he didn't get paid in the traditional sense. Instead of direct deposits into his bank account, he would be paid in stock options, and Jim was going to be investing any employment pay that he got for him. Jim continued to look into who was harassing Nick and Mindy. He ran down everyone, including the ex-wife's new husband, Mindy, one of her friends, and eventually he concluded that Nick was the victim of his own family's actions. Regardless of who was committing the bank fraud, Jim told Nick that the vandalism was likely just due to some neighborhood kids and that he really didn't have to worry about that aspect of what was going on. But Jim did say that it was probably best for Nick and Mindy to move, and not only to move, but to move frequently. And when Nick and Mindy were told that, they were like, okay, we will do whatever you say because you are in the FBI. At this point, Nick and Mindy got accustomed to a nomadic lifestyle. Nick testified that he and Mindy would be able to get up and go at the drop of a hat. And they moved frequently, by the way. He alleged that they moved between 15 to 25 times while in 2 different cities. And guess who paid for all of this? According to Nick, he thought that Jim was paying for the expenses. Now, he didn't think that Jim was personally paying for it, but that Jim was paying for it from those stock options and the investments that he was making on his behalf. He also says that he saw documentation about these investments. So let me go back to Jim's first wife. When they divorced, there were a few outstanding items for the property division. They had 2 co-owned debts that totaled roughly $20,000. That's it. They also owned about a $600,000 house together, and Nick stayed with the house, but there was an agreement in the divorce decree that Nick would refinance the house, removing Heather's name from the deed and allowing her to basically be able to use her VA benefit with her new husband. Well, Nick never paid his co-owned debts, and he never removed Heather from the mortgage. When the judge called a hearing on this specific matter, like, what are you waiting for, Nick? Nick showed up and said, listen, I have money. I have $32 million in a bank account, but I'm not paying Heather because of Mindy. But that was basically it. Then at this hearing, he offered a total of $1.5 million to his ex-wife. He's like, listen, to make up for, not doing this quicker, instead of just paying off the house or whatever it is and, paying off the $20,000 debt, I will give you $1.5 million to settle this. And of course she was like, yeah. Nick would later claim that he did this because Jim told him to do it. Jim was like, hey, we have $32 million in the bank account, so just offer her $1.5 million to shut her up. And that's what he did, and she accepted. But he never paid the $1.5 million. 10 months after that hearing, Nick finally moved out of that house in Alexandria, Virginia. All right, let's talk about all these moves that he did throughout the years. Mindy and Nick eventually went to a different town in Virginia, Charlottesville. Then Jim set him up in a more long-term rental, but that long-term rental was short-lived because Nick testified that when he moved into this long-term rental, he was attacked, like physically attacked. He claimed that he was attacked from behind, so he didn't see the perpetrator. In addition to basically getting a good whooping, the attacker kicked him in the face. This happened at night, and it happened from behind, so he couldn't see who it was. And on top of that, he didn't call the police. He claimed that he did contact the authorities, though, because he called Jim, and Jim is the authorities. And the following morning, Jim took him to the doctor. After telling Jim about the assault, Jim was like, all right, this was supposed to be a little bit more of a long-term place, but you have got to move. Again, Nick claimed that Jim paid for all the moving expenses and the rentals. But we later learn, not only during the trial, but also during his testimony, that all of these moves were charged to his friend Cameron's credit card. Now, while Nick discussed all the moves, he introduced the idea that he was provided with these large moving totes, or that he owned these large moving totes to be able to make moving a little bit easier. So he didn't use traditional boxes. He had these big totes where he just packed it up, and that's how they moved. Nick denied ever using Cameron's credit card when, they were like, hey, who was paying for this? They asked that multiple times, and, well, in addition to moving all over the East Coast, Jim advised Nick to get a P.O. box in Florida so that it wouldn't be tracked back to wherever he was physically living. And so that's what Nick did. He set up a P.O. box in Florida. By the way, I do want to add that Mindy, he did testify that Mindy never worked during her marriage to Nick. During this time period, Mindy had become very ill. She apparently had COVID during the scary COVID times, like 2020. And they thought that she was actually going to die. He wasn't allowed to be at the hospital. And we all know that those COVID times were serious. Like if someone had COVID and they had to go to the hospital, no one was allowed to visit them. And so after learning that Mindy would not survive, because remember, she got sick with COVID, she was at the hospital, he wasn't able to go, but he was told that, Mindy was going to die. Nick admitted on the stand that he started to see a woman named Joy. Apparently, Joy was a friend of Mindy, and they would talk often. And then he started seeing her because he was like, well, Mindy's going to die anyway. But guess what? Mindy didn't die from COVID. So I guess Joy just kind of vanished. Around February of 2021, Cameron reached out to Nick and told him that, remember, Cameron's a friend with a credit card. She reaches out to Nick and tells him, listen, I can no longer afford to allow you to use our credit card because finances are getting tough with the restaurant business and yada, yada. And Nick said that was the moment when when Cameron reached out to him and told him that he could no longer use your credit card. That was the moment that he realized that Jim had been using Cameron's credit card to pay for all the expenses. And at that point, he knew, oh, shoot, Jim is not an FBI agent. He is not who he says he is. And Nick testified that he was livid. Nick said he tried to cut ties with Jim McIntyre, but apparently Mindy didn't want to. She really trusted Jim regardless of whether he was an FBI agent or not. So Nick confronts Jim and he's like, hey, you are not even an FBI agent, are you? Jim told him the truth. He said, you're right. I lied. I'm not an FBI agent. But listen, I know a lot of FBI agents, so I kind of know a lot. And I do have to tell you something about what I really do. I am the majority shareholder in Apis Limited. This job that you've been working at for years, I'm a majority shareholder. Oh, and by the way, every time that Nick and Mindy moved, they loved to state hop. I just want to say they would move from Virginia to South Carolina to North Carolina to Georgia. And apparently, magically, Jim was always nearby. So where they moved, Jim moved. So Jim was like their personal FBI agent until he realized that he wasn't an FBI agent. All right. February 2021, Cameron cuts off Nick's financial support, and Nick and Mindy end up moving in with Mindy's brother, Frank the Fourth. By the way, we learned through his testimony that Frank the Fourth is a police officer. Let that sink in. Okay. We heard a lot about Frank the Fourth and this entire living arrangement from Betsy's testimony. But I didn't realize this. Nick and Mindy were living with Frank the Fourth for 16 months. And not only were they living with Frank the Fourth for 16 months, but they never paid a single dollar to Nick. They didn't pay for rent. They didn't pay for food. Oh, and by the way, remember Rusty the dog? They never paid for dog food. Isn't that weird? Well, Frank the Fourth then filed for eviction, although Nick was like, I don't think that was necessary, but he did, and so he moved. After leaving Frank the Fourth's place, Betsy paid for the following 2 hotels. And we know because she testified to that. Now, let's discuss Nick's hobby of something we had not heard before. He has a hobby of writing fiction horror stories. He testified that he dabbled in writing, but it was mostly for Reddit, like the Reddit forums. And one time he wrote a big story that made it big. And the name of that story was called My Mother-in-Law is Poisoning Me, and I Found Out Why. Interestingly, the mother-in-law in that story, her name was Betsy. And you might recall that his actual mother-in-law's name is Betsy. Now, I'll probably do a bonus episode where I read you that story, whether it's his or not, I'm not sure, but we're going to hear more about this in a second. And in case you're interested in hearing Nick's explanation of the plot of his story, here it is.
What was the name of the short story that you licensed to Sony?
My mother-in-law is poisoning me, and then I found out why.
What's the name of the mother-in-law?
Betsy.
How'd you come up with that name?
Betsy was my mother-in-law.
What was your relationship like with Betsy?
Fantastic.
Can you describe the plot of that short story?
Yeah, a young woman is married to somebody, and she feels like she's being poisoned by his mother-in-law every time she visits his in-laws' house, and nobody believes her, and over time it all comes to a head. It turns out that the mother-in-law is giving her something to make her sick because the mother-in-law is concerned that the husband is going to kill her for insurance money. The mother-in-law is the hero of the story. She is keeping her safe and sick and in the house so that the evil husband, who winds up dying at the end of the story, does not bring her out and kill her for money.
Is the evil husband modeled after you?
No.
How much did you sell that to? How much money did you get selling that short story to Sony?
$300,000.
Was that the complete amount that was paid by Sony?
No. The complete amount was $400,000.
What happened to the other $100,000?
Lawyers, managers, agents.
When did you receive the $300,000 from Sony?
Late June of 2022.
And how did you receive that money? In what form?
It was sent to a bank account that Mr. McIntyre had said he was comfortable with their security, that he was going to help keep safe. Renaissance Bank. I believe there's one right across the street from here.
I thought you told law enforcement that Jim McIntyre facilitated giving you that money.
He facilitated in that, he made sure that I could get it safely. He also said that he was involved. The original story got picked up by Sony because it went kind of viral. It was featured on a TikTok channel. I don't use TikTok, but it got attention there, and then from there it spread to Twitter. He said that he was working with some I don't know what you would call it, web-based companies that are designed to get attention on certain things.
Now, you said that you had learned prior to this that actually Cameron's credit card had been used to pay for a lot of your rentals and expenses, correct?
Yes, that's true.
So when you received that $300,000, how much of that did you give to Cameron?
I did not give any of that to Cameron.
And why not?
Because I believed that there was more money coming shortly thereafter, and that this was the money that we were going to both get ourselves settled with and get Mindy's parents settled with.
All right, so Nicholas Kassotis falls into this big chunk of change, which, by the way, no one ever says is not true, so maybe it's true. But this is when Nick books the Airbnb in Georgia out of his own pocket, allegedly. He also buys a Ford Explorer with that money, and he doesn't finance it through anyone. He literally just pays, with his own money. Let's talk about employment. Mindy, as I said, was unemployed this entire time. And Nick, he worked for Apis Limited. And he said when they were like, hey, what did you do for Apis? He says that he would start working in the morning and that he would work through 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. Mindy never left the house because she literally feared for her life and she thought someone was going to kill her. And her mom testified to that as well. So at least this part of it is true. Let's talk pregnancies. Nick testified that Mindy had a miscarriage in 2021 and that in 2022, while they were still living with Frank IV, she told him she was pregnant. Nick said he wholeheartedly believed she was pregnant. They then discuss on the stand some of the evidence. His attorney is like, okay, so listen, the state provided evidence that you bought a shovel in November. Why did you buy the shovel? Nick explains he bought the shovel because at this rental property in Georgia, they were having huge mosquito issues. And he bought the shovel because he needed to dig in the crawl space because the mosquitoes were getting into their house through the bathroom mirror. Apparently, there was a hole and the hole led to the crawl space. And he was trying to get into the crawl space, so he needed the shovel. Did he ever call the landlord? No. He said that Jim and him had a deal. If work ever needed to be done inside the house, Nick had to do the work himself because it was dangerous to allow people to come into the house. It was fair game, however, if a contractor needed to do something outside of the house, meaning in the perimeter, then he would contact outside help. Let's talk Thanksgiving. Nick testified that his in-laws went away and that Mindy was in bad shape. We already know that. During Thanksgiving break, he cooked dinner and then he doesn't say when, but he says that he went out house hunting for his in-laws because Mindy and him were getting ready to relocate again and they didn't want to relocate with the in-laws and he needed to find them a place to stay. While he was out and about house hunting on one of these days, I don't think it was Thanksgiving, it was either Friday or Saturday, Mindy made contact and it was through that app that they were using. She contacted him and she was like, listen, I'm not feeling well. And so I'm going to head to the birthing center. Nick was like, oh my goodness, do you need me to come home? Do you need me to be with you? And she was like, no, I got someone to take me. Like, you don't have to worry about it. Later that day, Nick gets home and it's about a day or two before he finally hears from Mindy. The service is really bad wherever she's staying. So they can't do like face messages or face communication. They can only communicate via messages. During these days, when his 8-month pregnant wife is at a facility, he testifies that Mindy messages him and is like, hey, I know I'm sick, but I'm already thinking about Christmas gifts. And I think that we should buy my brother a deer processing kit. So go to Bass Pro and get that. So his testimony on the stand was that he went to Bass Pro to buy that deer processing kit because Mindy told him to buy it as a Christmas gift for her brother. So that's why he bought it. When asked why he didn't give the kit to his brother-in-law after finding out that Mindy had passed, Nick said, listen, after finding out that my wife was dead, I just wanted to get out of the house, so I just left it behind. Let me recap before I go further. Mindy goes to the birthing center either on Friday or Saturday right after Thanksgiving. He gets noticed to go pick her up a week later on Thursday, December 1st. Nick shows up to this place. It's a brick building. He can't really remember anything about it, where it's at, who the doctor is, who he spoke to. But he shows up and they take him to this room in the back. And that's where they inform him that Mindy died from complications. He requested to see her one last time, but he couldn't. He says he was like, oh, maybe they already took her for autopsy, which is why I couldn't see her. He didn't recall, again, the address or the doctor's name. Then Nick went home that very same day and told his in-laws that Mindy had passed away. This part of his testimony gets a little wonky, so I'll let you listen for yourself. This is him describing at some point that he took 2 totes, one gray and one black, and made some form of drop-off.
What was the name of the short story that you licensed to Sony?
My mother-in-law is poisoning me, and then I found out why.
What's the name of the mother-in-law?
Betsy.
How'd you come up with that name?
Betsy was my mother-in-law.
What was your relationship like with Betsy?
Fantastic.
Can you describe the plot of that short story?
Yeah, a young woman is married to somebody, and she feels like she's being poisoned by his mother-in-law every time she visits his in-laws' house, and nobody believes her, and over time it all comes to a head. It turns out that the mother-in-law is giving her something to make her sick because the mother-in-law is concerned that the husband is going to kill her for insurance money. The mother-in-law is the hero of the story. She is keeping her safe and sick and in the house so that the evil husband, who winds up dying at the end of the story, does not bring her out and kill her for money.
Is the evil husband modeled after you?
No.
How much did you sell that to? How much money did you get selling that short story to Sony?
$300,000.
Was that the complete amount that was paid by Sony?
No. The complete amount was $400,000.
What happened to the other $100,000?
Lawyers, managers, agents.
When did you receive the $300,000 from Sony?
Late June of 2022.
And how did you receive that money? In what form?
It was sent to a bank account that Mr. McIntyre had said he was comfortable with their security, that he was going to help keep safe. Renaissance Bank. I believe there's one right across the street from here.
I thought you told law enforcement that Jim McIntyre facilitated giving you that money.
He facilitated in that, he made sure that I could get it safely. He also said that he was involved. The original story got picked up by Sony because it went kind of viral. It was featured on a TikTok channel. I don't use TikTok, but it got attention there. And then from there, it spread to Twitter. He said that he was working with some, I don't know what you would call it, web-based companies that are designed to get attention on certain things.
Now, you said that you had learned prior to this that actually Cameron's credit card had been used to pay for a lot of your rentals and expenses, correct?
Yes, that's true.
So when you received that $300,000, how much of that did you give to Cameron?
I did not give any of that to Cameron.
And why not?
Because I believed that there was more money coming shortly thereafter, and that this was the money that we were going to both get ourselves settled with and get Mindy's parents settled with.
After Mindy died, Nicholas moved his in-laws to a new place, and he did agree, and he did say that he used his own debit card. His attorney was like, okay, well, you weren't using your own card before because you were scared to get tracked, so why did you start using it now? Of course, Jim told him it was okay to start using it because there was nothing shady going on with this new bank account. He drops off his in-laws, then he drives to Florida, he spends the night there, then he goes to check his P.O. box, because remember, he has a P.O. box in Florida. That's where he picks up some beer that apparently his friend had sent him. From there, he drives to Missouri, but on the way, he stops in Alabama. In Alabama, Nick meets a man on the side of the road who gives him Mindy's ashes in a bag, along with her wedding rings. Nick said that he was pissed because he didn't realize that Mindy was going to be cremated. But nonetheless, he hands the random man $5,000 and leaves. From there, from Alabama, he goes to Missouri, and in Missouri, he submits an application for a name change. When he fills out the paperwork for the name change, he claims that he's changing his name because you have to have a reason, right? He claims that he's changing his name because he's a victim of domestic violence, but not at the hands of any of his spouses or ex-spouses. He says he's a victim of domestic violence at the hands of his father. He also said that he submitted paperwork showing that he filed a police report, and he also submitted hospital records because apparently he believes that when he was attacked from the back, he thought that that was his dad who did it. So he filed a report, and he also went to the hospital. He brought those documents with him, allegedly, to complete this Missouri name change, and this allowed his name change request to be sealed. Nick testified that the name change, according to Jim, was the culmination of this entire thing. He was a little bit safer now. He just needed to change his name. He couldn't do it right away when everything was happening because then they could track it back to him. But now he was sufficiently far away from all of the issues that they were originally having that he could now change his name. And Jim told him, like, this is almost over. Like, we are about to cut ties. After this name change, he eventually moved to Pennsylvania. The defense then goes into Nick's relationship with Samantha, the third wife. Like, he tells him, explain that to the jury. How did that all go down? Nick began communicating with Samantha in September of 2022. Why did he tell Samantha, though, that his wife died in 2020? Nick says that he told her that his wife died in 2020 because Jim was the one who was mad. Basically, Jim found out that Nicholas was on social media telling people that he was married and having communications and yada yada. And that when Jim found that out, he was like, listen, I should have been paying closer tabs to your social media engagement. And now you need to go back and undo this. Tell everybody that your wife died. Oh, and by the way, not only do you have to tell them that your wife died, every single time your actual wife, who's still very much alive, gets sick for a different reason, change the reason why she died. So whoever you talk to, tell someone that she died of COVID, and then you can change it to like, oh, she died because of high blood pressure or whatever it is. So Jim was the one who was like, you need to start lying and telling people that your wife died in 2020. I know that it feels like I'm skipping around a lot, but that's because that's literally what his testimony sounded like. Let's talk about the burning car. This is Nick telling you himself about the burning car and how that went down.
When did you get married to Samantha?
April 21st of 2023.
We've seen pictures of your burned up Ford Explorer. What happened?
Sir. On believe it was March 20th of 2023, I was driving the Ford Explorer. I had left the rental we were staying at, driven north to run some errands, and also to, I believe, picked up a cashier's check for the purchase of a home. And shortly thereafter, I was making a turn onto another road, and the car was kind of fighting me a little. Like it was taking more force to turn than I thought it would. I continued down the road and was smelling something odd, which in Lancaster County is not necessarily indicative of anything but that you're driving by a farm. And I stopped. At that point, I realized that there was smoke in the interior of the car. I got out, and crossed around to the passenger side to get my phone out, but opened the door, and the fire kind of just came right up at me. It was the car went up extremely fast.
What injuries, if any, did you suffer?
I suffered some burns to my face. I lost a lot of hair, like an eyebrow, and a lot of hair off the side of my head. I also had a burn to my right eye. It didn't occur to me before this that your eyes could actually get burned, but they can.
What happened to the goods that were in your vehicle?
Everything was destroyed.
You mentioned picking up a cashier's check to purchase a home.
Yes.
Tell me about your home purchase.
Sam and I had been looking for places to live, and we had settled on a house in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
When was the closing date?
Closing date was March 20th.
Did you put any deposit on the house?
I put a $50,000 EMD on the house.
Did you ever, where was the cashier's check from?
I believe it was from Citizens Bank, but I did not physically draw the cashier's check. I looked at it to verify that the name of the closing company was right, that the amount was right, and I believe it was a Citizens Bank cashier's check. Actually, I know it was a Citizens Bank because I called Citizens Bank thereafter to discuss with them.
You say you didn't draw the cashier's check. Who
Yes.
drew the cashier's check?
Somebody that Jim McIntyre worked with, who he had me meet and pick up that morning.
And what happened to the check?
The check burned along with my car, bits of me, and everything I had in the car at the time.
What did you do about the destroyed check?
I talked to Mr. McIntyre. I mean, within, I don't know the exact time. It was pretty shocking. But I was driven back to the rental by a police officer, and I called him while I was still in the police officer's car to say I need a new cashier's check, and he said, I think that might take a while. I think that's a problem. So while he was calling about the actual account, I was calling the general Citizens Bank customer service, and they confirmed to me that it was a long process to get a cashier's check reissued, because their concern is they have to honor a cashier's check, so they have to wait a certain amount of time after they have issued the kind of stop payment on it to make sure it has not been presented at some other bank.
At the end of the day, when asked if he killed Mindy, he said no. He would never hurt his wife. He did not kill Mindy. For cross-examination, the prosecutor did an excellent job in allowing or leading Nick to agree to all of the crazy lies he told and the crazy things that he did. So she was basically saying, like, you did this. Yes, you did this. No, she was asking him yes or no questions, which is what you're supposed to do in cross. The big thing was pointing out that 2 weeks before his wife died, he was sending flowers to Mindy. Remember, the woman that he met like 2 months before his wife got really sick and died in the hospital. And let's not forget that Nicholas Kassotis also paid for Sam's new tires at the end of November as well. So your wife is sick. So what she was trying to say was, like, your wife is sick in the hospital and pregnant, by the way, and you're not even with her. Instead, you're paying for this random woman who you've never met in person. You're paying for her tires, and you sent her flowers 2 weeks after you said you were devastated that your wife died in the hospital. And he said, yeah, that's what I did. The prosecutor then confronts Nick about him changing out the rug at the Airbnb. And Nick had a response for that. Yeah, I did change out the rug. And that was because Rusty threw up on the carpet. Mindy put the carpet out back, left it out there for several days. By the time we tried to clean it, it was so gross. So we tossed it and I replaced it. With regards to his purchasing a shovel, the prosecutor expressed how incredulous it was to think that he was paying $4,500 a month for their Airbnb rental. Yet instead of him calling the landlord or the Airbnb host about the mosquito issue, he decided to take care of it himself. And guess what? The day after Nick said that he found out his wife was dead, he got a car wash. And the prosecutor was like, here's a picture of your receipt and here's a picture of you washing your car. And Nick was like, well, I don't really remember that, but if you say that happened, then I guess that was me. DA Bio asked Nicholas Kassotis, did you ever find Jim McIntyre, like, after you were arrested so that he could come testify on your behalf? And Nick said that he tried, but he could never find him.
Mr. Kassotis, in anticipation of today's date, you located Mr. McIntyre, right?
No, ma'am.
So you've been talking to him basically on and off since what, 2017?
I started talking to him in fall of 2017, I believe, and we last spoke in, I want to say, mid-April of 2023.
The DA, with these two black totes behind her, the black one and the gray one, then asked Nick about the totes. She said, are these the totes that you dropped off in the woods? To which Nick responded, no, these are not the totes. And I can tell because the ones that I owned were really old. They were beat up because of all of the moves. However, if you look clearly at these and you look past all the fingerprint dust, these look like they're in newer conditions, and you can see because of like the stickers that they have on them. Listen, alternates, this was an interesting defense testimony, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Nick's testimony did take up the majority of the day, and the defense rested after this, and they went swiftly, I mean swiftly, into closing arguments. The defense went first.
Nicholas Kassotis has lied to many, many people. He has left a wake of emotional distress amongst a number of his friends and family. His parents, Linda and Wayne, who you've seen throughout this trial behind him, were shut off by him because he believed that, for some reason, his father Wayne was after him. He told people all kinds of lies about his parents, that they weren't his real parents, that he was abused growing up, that his real parents were somewhere in England, that he was kidnapped, taken to the U.S., caused tremendous pain to them. He caused pain to all of the friends that he lied to for those years. And you heard from them. Cameron. On top of the pain for Cameron, he took $200,000 of her money. So you can find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Nick Kassotis lied to people. That Nick Kassotis took advantage of people like Cameron. You see and you heard what Nick Kassotis did with Samantha Kolyesnik, his third wife. Told her lies. Married her under false pretenses to such an extent that the state of Pennsylvania granted her, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, granted her an annulment, which, as she told you, was very difficult to get. He treated her terribly. You can find beyond a reasonable doubt that he did that to Samantha. There's no doubt about it. You've heard a lot about Jim McIntyre. I'm sure the state will talk a lot about Jim McIntyre. But this trial is not about whether there is or is not a Jim McIntyre. This trial is not about whether you believe that there's a Jim McIntyre running around or you believe that Nicholas Kassotis committed these crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. This isn't a trial about Jim McIntyre. This is a trial, unfortunately, about Mindy Kassotis and who killed Mindy Kassotis. So I'm going to ask you to look at those facts. Look at the facts that the state has presented and make your decision based on those facts. The GBI did an incredible job in investigating the death of Mindy Kassotis. Agent Sands is a fantastic agent. His partner, I'll call him the partner, did a fantastic job at the crime scene. But they very quickly zeroed in on Nicholas Kassotis. And as far as their investigation of Nicholas Kassotis, it really could not have been more thorough, could it? They pulled all of his bank information. They looked at credit cards, Airbnb documents, a host of exhibits that you will all have access to, showing all of his movements, his GPS movements of his vehicle, everything about Nicholas Kassotis. But what else did you hear? Nobody's perfect. And as great as Agent Sands and his team are, they didn't follow everything, right? Jim McIntyre. They had a number of leads on Jim McIntyre's all over the place. What is the Jim McIntyre lead they followed up on? The one that was convenient. The one that was over here in Savannah, near the law office, where Miss Mebane worked. That's the one they followed up on. The crime scene. They picked up a cigarette box that was in the road, halfway between the location of Mindy Kassotis' torso and one of these totes over here. They picked that up. What did they do with it? As far as the evidence that's been admitted, nothing. No follow-up. Why no follow-up? Why no analysis? Why not look for DNA on the box? Maybe find leads? Because they had already decided. As soon as they saw video from that camera of the husband's car near the scene of the body, the investigation for suspects was effectively over. That was it. They had their guy. Nick Kassotis was their guy. They didn't need to follow up on that cigarette pack. How many other cars were captured on that motion camera at the pumping station that day, or over those 3 days that I asked about? Numerous cars. Were any of those cars followed up on? These are cars going by a scene where Mindy Kassotis' body is found. What investigation took place on all of those other people that went by where that body was? Nothing. Nothing. Why not? Because they had their man. He's sitting right over there. He's the guy that did it. We don't need to look into anyone else. All that we need to do is pour all of the resources of the GBI, FBI resources from Agent Bernie with his cast. Let's direct everything into Nick Kassotis, because we have our guy. He did it.
The defense's theme throughout their argument was tunnel vision. That's every neophyte defense attorney's argument. I'm not saying that he's a neophyte, but, the entire tunnel vision thing is very common. What he was basically saying was, jury, the investigators got tunnel vision in this case. They looked into my clients and they never looked at other potential suspects. This is called tunnel vision. Weinstein told the jury not to rush to judgment and to deliberate. He was like, when y'all go back to the room in the back, we want you to actually deliberate and actually look at each piece of evidence. According to him, Nick's story never changed. Despite the investigators, lying to him during the interrogation, telling them they had all this proof, he also pointed out that the prosecutor doesn't even know where the crime scene occurred. He finished with telling the jury that they need to know the burden and that they need to serve appropriate justice by asking themselves, does this evidence prove that Nicholas Kassotis committed this crime? DA Bayo was up for the prosecution.
We're all here because of Mindy. Every single one of us is here because of Mindy. Sometime the weekend over Thanksgiving, Saturday into Sunday, 2022, everything changed. For every single person that testified. Everything changed. Mindy, have you ever been to a pond and you drop a rock in the center, or if you were a kid you used to skip it? You'd see the ripples, right? You'd see those ripples go out from where you dropped the rock. All those witnesses were ripples. And he dropped the rock. He killed her. He took her from everyone. A bright light. Kind. Good-natured. you're going to see a lot of things that we talked about in opening statement. My mom always told me, under promise, over deliver. Under promise, over deliver. That's what we've done. December 2nd, 2022, at about 4:50 in the afternoon, several hunters found the horrific discovery. The rock. Those hunters are ripples. Never the same. They were out there hunting Thanksgiving weekend, big hunting season in Georgia, deer, right? And they come across, I'm sorry, a headless, legless body of a woman. Law enforcement had no idea who she was for months because of him. Because he made it possible only to figure out who she was through a buccal swab from her mom. In May, almost 6 months later, he did that. Right here in Liberty County. And he dumped her in the woods. And I submit to you, he dumped her in the woods because that was a great place to hide a body. The problem is when you're not from Liberty County and you don't know Barrington Ferry Road and you don't know Jones Road and you don't know where they meet in McIntyre, you don't know there's a camera on the water tower. You don't know that there are logging trucks. You saw the logging trucks going down the road. Counsel would have you believe that Agent Sands and his team should have identified any possible human that went down that road. How is that relevant in any way, shape, or form to who would have had access to Mindy? Now, all of you promised me during jury selection you would not check your common sense at the door. You'd bring it with you, you'd evaluate the evidence, and you would use your common sense.
Throughout her closing argument, Throughout her closing argument, DA Bio admitted that she could not say for certain where the crime scene was. She couldn't pinpoint a direct motive because this man, and she pointed to him, it was such a liar. But she appears to believe, the prosecutor, so this is the state's theory, is they believe that Mindy lied about being pregnant. She was the one who actually told Nick she was pregnant, and she did that to keep Nick. She did that to keep Nick because he was the one who really wanted a baby, which, thank the Lord, this man never procreated, right? The DA harped on the missing rug, the blood on the floor under the rug, Mindy's blood on the futon, purchasing the shovel, the defensive wounds on Mindy's arm bones, the car wash. But the most important evidence that she wanted the jury to focus on was the map showing Nick's cell phone and the car tracker near where Mindy's remains were discovered. She also popped up pictures of Nick driving by that way station or whatever that station was called. And she said, this evidence is really important because he wasn't, counting on there being one camera in the middle of the woods. She also offered that he spent 2 hours in the woods cutting up the body and disposing of the parts, and that evidence was the 2 hours where he shut his phone off, but his car tracked him through the woods. She also says he didn't count on his car having GPS and tracking him, but it did, and guess what? He's guilty. Jurors are expected back in court on day 8 for 30 minutes of jury instructions, and then they will begin their deliberations. That means the end is very near, and you might have day 8 as soon as day 7 drops. So what does that mean for you? Follow the show wherever you're watching or listening so that you are notified as soon as we drop the verdict episode. Alternates, this is the wildest case on this show so far. As always, keep us posted if you hear of cases on the docket that you would like us to cover, and we can definitely put it on the list. And if you like this show, make sure you rate and review it. We're trying to grow, and sharing reviews and sharing how much you love us, that really helps us to find our people. All right, alternates, as always, think like a juror, decide like one too.
Okay, welcome to the alternate. I think I am going to put this right at the end of Margot's episode. So, breaking news, because we were just getting ready to upload the episode from day 7 of the Nicholas Kassotis trial. And bam, after 1 hour and 12 minutes, we have a verdict. So obviously he did not keep his story straight, or he kind of did keep his story straight. However, it was so cuckoo bananas that it obviously did not make sense, you guys. He turned his phone off, still had GPS, burned his car down. I mean, this guy has got a wild imagination. I will tell you that. And the jury saw right through it, because after 1 hour and 12 minutes, they came back with a guilty on all charges. Thank you, Jesus, because I am telling you, I was a little worried. I really was. And so those juror members that they chose in Georgia, you saw through all of his BS and you made the right decision. And guess what? We're not going to have to wait months or even weeks or longer for sentencing, because the judge says, let's go. We are going to do the sentencing today as well. So we will be back with you with the sentencing of Nicholas Kassotis, but I think we all knew that this guy was telling so many lies to so many people. And the tragedy of it all is that his poor wife, Mindy, was living through his chaos for a bit of their marriage. And she tragically passed. And that is why we are all here to see justice for Mindy Kassotis. So today, I think we'll bring that in part. I mean, there's never truly justice because we lost a life, but in part, Mindy's family, I'm sure, is sighing a sigh of relief. And who knows, probably Nicholas Kassotis' family too. Those poor people are sitting behind him this whole entire trial, listening to his crazy stories about them and still showing up and supporting him. So I'm sure they also probably are feeling a little bit of relief today too, that this is finally over. So thank you for listening. We will be back with the verdict, or not the verdict, but the sentencing. And thanks for listening. And the next trial is coming up. I don't know if we're going to take off right away and do one, or we are going to wait for the Donna Adelson case, but we will let you know. And as always, thank you for listening, and think like a juror and decide like one too. That's what we try to do. Clank, clank.